Hello students, today we will study a French novel. We will study it in translation. We have to know literature from European languages in translated form and analyze the typical characteristics and influences of such translation on English literature. So, today we will take up for discussion a very famous novel by Alexandre Dumas, the great French novelist. The name of the novel is The Three Musketeers. The Three Musketeers is a French novel written by Alexandre Dumas, as I have already told you. The Three Musketeers was first published in Paris in serial form in the newspaper Le Siècle between March and July 1844. Alexandre Dumas was a French writer, best known for his historical novels of high adventure. Translated into nearly 100 languages, his novels have made him one of the most widely read French authors in history. Alexandre Dumas, in French actually it is pronounced as Dumas. So, from now onwards we will call him Dumas. He was born in 1802. He was raised by his mother. His father, a general during the revolution and under Napoleon, died when Dumas was only 4-year-old. The family had fallen out of favor with Napoleon, so young Dumas and his mother were left without means, living in the provinces. Dumas received a limited education from a local priest, and at the age of 21, he travelled to Paris to make his fortune. He began a successful career as a dramatist and writer. His first play was produced in 1829. His most famous novels are The Three Musketeers, which we will do today, and The Count of Monte Cristo. As he grew older, Dumas' opulent lifestyle forced him to sink into greater and greater debt, and by the time of his death in 1870, he was at the mercy of his creditors. In the 17th century, this story is set. It recounts the adventures of a young man named D'Artagnan after he leaves home to travel to Paris to join the Musketeers of the Guard. D'Artagnan is not one of the Musketeers of the title. Those are his friends Athos, Porthos and Aramis. They are inseparable friends who live by the motto, all for one, one for all, a motto which is first put forth by D'Artagnan. In the very first sentences of his preface, Alexandre Dumas indicated as his sources a book called Memoirs de Monsieur d'Artagnan and a manuscript with the title Memoirs de Monsieur le Count de la Fère. We study it because it represents an important development in historical and popular fiction. The Three Musketeers enjoyed enormous popular success and is still well loved today. Now we will discuss the importance of the Three Musketeers. The Three Musketeers is a rare treasure, a work that is both important and fun. Even more remarkably, the Three Musketeers is important because it is fun. It caused a popular sensation. Long lines waited for each new issue of Siècle. Parisians stood in line because he provided more excitement than previous authors. However, Dumas does draw on some familiar literary traditions to tell his magical story. Dumas' brilliant concept was to combine the historical novel and the romance into a single story. Dumas brought these two forms together in a way that revolutionized the historical novel. Before Dumas, the form was plagued by slow pace, labored historicity, and archaic prose. Dumas wrote in modern conversational prose. He made his story more important than the history surrounding it. Dumas wrote fast-reading adventure stories that evoked history without being bogged down with it. Dumas' innovations provide us with a wonderful escape into another time and place. But in his own time in France, they may have performed an even more important function. Following the chaos and violence of the French Revolution, 19th century France was a nation in turmoil. The people latched on to Dumas' novels because the novels gave them a sense of national pride. The crowning achievement of the Three Musketeers is Dumas' successful creation of an extraordinarily comforting make-believe world which is based on 17th century France. The novel creates a romance of history that is sweeping, entertaining, and grand, and takes out all the bits that might have made his public uncomfortable. Dumas' formula serves his story well. His incorporation of romanticism into the historical novel lifted an entire genre of literature into public adulation. Popular literature must be considered on two fronts, aesthetically and socially, as literature and as a popular artifact. The best popular literature, like this book, transcends the social aspect to come into our minds as a work of literature in its own right. It is not necessary to know about Dumas' life, or about French history, or about the genre of romance to enjoy the Three Musketeers. The superlative entertainment of the novel speaks for itself, which is why it remains so important and so interesting to study it. Now, let us discuss the summary of the plot. In 1625, D'Artagnan, a poor young nobleman, travels to Paris with the intention of joining the musketeer of the guard. En route, a man derides his horse, and feeling insulted, D'Artagnan demands to fight a duel with him. He is beaten unconscious, and his letter of introduction to Monsieur de Trevel, the commander of the musketeers, is stolen. Trevel now refuses his application to join. From Trevel's window, D'Artagnan sees his attacker Rochefort passing in the street below, and he rushes out to confront him. But in doing so, he causes offense to the Three Musketeers, Athos, Porthos, and Aramis. But just as he and Athos begin to duel, Cardinal Richelieu's guards tried to arrest D'Artagnan and the Three Musketeers for illegal dueling. Although outnumbered, the four men win the battle that follows. They become close friends now. D'Artagnan seriously wounds a renowned fighter who was the cardinal's officer. After learning of this event, King Louis XIII appoints D'Artagnan to des Essarts' company of guards, a less prestigious regiment in which he must serve for 2 years before being considered for the Musketeers. He falls in love with his landlord's wife, Constance. Constance works for Queen Anne of France, who is secretly conducting an affair with the Duke of Buckingham. The Queen presents the Duke of Buckingham the diamonds which she had received from the king. As the cardinal tries to start a war between France and England, he gets an opportunity now and organizes an event to reveal this. He talks the king into demanding that the queen wear the diamonds at this event. D'Artagnan and his friends decide to help. On their mission, they are frequently attacked by the cardinal's henchmen. Although 2 diamonds have been stolen by the villainous spy Milady, the Duke of Buckingham is able to provide replacements. D'Artagnan is thus able to return a complete set of jewels to Queen Anne just in time to save her honor. When D'Artagnan meets Milady, he recognizes her as one of Cardinal's agents. And he also discovers a fleur-de-lis branded on Milady's shoulder, marking her as a felon. This word felon means a criminal. D'Artagnan eludes her attempt on his life and is ordered to the siege of La Rochelle. Milady is imprisoned on arrival in England, but she seduces and persuades her guard both to allow her escape and to kill Buckingham, which he does. On her return to France, Milady meets Constance. Milady sees a chance to get back at D'Artagnan, who with his friends foiled her plans regularly and fatally poisons Constance. The Musketeers find Milady and she is put to trial and sentenced to death. The siege of La Rochelle ends in 1628, which also marks the end of this book. Aramis retires to a monastery, Porthos marries his wealthy mistress, and Athos serves in the Musketeers under D'Artagnan. So, here the story ends. Now, we will move on to discuss the literary qualities of the Three Musketeers. So, first we will take up the Three Musketeers as a romance. The Three Musketeers employs to great effect the typical elements of a romance. A romance has many qualities. One by one, we will take up each point. First, we will discuss quest. Romance is centered on some quest. This book narrates the adventure of D'Artagnan, which culminates in the success of his mission of becoming a musketeer. The second point is love. In romance, love is taken as a powerful and true force which motivates their actions. This is amply evident in this story, where the main characters, for example, D'Artagnan, Athos, Constance, the Queen, Milady and Buckingham act basically because of their love for someone. Next comes immorality. One of the characteristics of the romance is immorality juxtaposed with allegiance to chivalric virtue. This is evident in D'Artagnan's falling in love with Constance, who was already a married girl. Milady is thoroughly immoral. Even the queen acts immorally. Next comes chivalry. The heroes in any romance are guided by the ideals of chivalry, which means defending one's honor at all costs. It also entails treating women's honor similarly. The storyline involves nothing but D'Artagnan's defending his honor as well as the honor of Constance and Queen Anne, staking his all. The next point is narrative eventfulness. The romance, following its heroes' pursuit of their quest, is packed with events and exciting dramatic encounters. The plot doesn't begin, develop and climax, but instead just sort of continues going on and on. Dumas uses the romance's unrelenting eventfulness, but it is shielded by the fact of his magazine installment publication format. The Three Musketeers, although well paced and entertaining, doesn't have the recognizable story beats that a modern adventure novel has. Now we come to stock characters. The traditional romance relies on common and recognizable characters. Dumas uses stock characters like the greedy innkeeper, the aging discontented wife, etc. There are certainly recognizable characteristics in some of his central players also. The last point that we discuss here is religion. Religious themes are an intimate part of the romance. Dumas makes religion an integral part of his story on two fronts. First, it uses the cardinal's presence as the primary antagonist of part 1 and the presence of his heroes at the siege of La Rochelle throughout part 2. This siege was a part of Cardinal's Catholic war against the Protestants. Dumas gives us a fully developed romance within a historical framework. He starts with cheerfulness and confidence and ends with moroseness and doubt. The return to the normal at the end of the great quest characterize the form of the romance as much as do its lighter aspects. We will discuss The Three Musketeers as a historical novel. The Three Musketeers is not merely a romance. It is also a great historical novel. Historical novel means fiction based on historical events. Dumas' interesting approach to history contributes to the success of this book. The Three Musketeers weaves its plot around some of the major characters and events of 17th century French history. The important characters really lived and acted roughly the way they do in the novel. In fact, the historical basis of Dumas' story extends even to the Musketeers and D'Artagnan. The Three Musketeers is inspired by the historically based Memoirs d'Artagnan by Sandras. D'Artagnan, the hero of the Three Musketeers, was really Charles the Bad's Castlemore and hailed from Gascony, just as Dumas writes. He took the name of Sieur d'Artagnan from a property his mother's family owned. Porthos, Athos and Aramis are also based on real musketeers, Isaac de Porto, Armand de Saligue and Henry d'Aramis. The major historical figures in the novel, Louis XIII, Anne of Austria, Cardinal Richelieu, Féton and de Treville, are all presented without much historical inaccuracies. King's musketeers under Louis XIII served as the king's personal escort in peacetime. Treville and Cardinal were great adversaries, as Dumas portrays them. In fact, Treville was involved in a plot to assassinate the Cardinal. Richelieu did have his own elite company of guards, which had a great rivalry with the musketeers, as Dumas describes. In general, then, we see that Dumas' novel is based on history, although he takes great departures. The one great example is the character of Milady de Winter. Milady became a fascinating character. Dumas was far more concerned with creating interesting fiction and tying that into history than in remaining blindly loyal to history. While Dumas keeps his characters away from being major players in national events, he brazenly attributes human motives to history. In his version, France and England very nearly fight a war simply because the Duke of Buckingham loves Queen Anne. Féton assassinates Buckingham because of personal reasons provided by Milady, and so on. Part of the entertainment of the Three Musketeers is that, in seeming to avoid the great events and focus on petty affairs, Dumas explains the great events more satisfyingly and entertainingly than any direct explanation of affairs of state could hope to do. First, of course, we will take up the character of D'Artagnan, who is the hero of the Three Musketeers. The central character of the novel, D'Artagnan, is a young, impoverished nobleman who comes to make his fortune in Paris. He is brave, he is ambitious, he is crafty, and he is intelligent. Like any romantic hero, he is driven by love and ruled by chivalry, but he occasionally is prone to fall into amoral behavior. Next, we will discuss the character of Athos, the first of the musketeers. Athos is the most important of the Three Musketeers. He is something of a father figure to D'Artagnan, although he is still a young man. Athos is distinguished in every way: intellect, appearance, bravery, swordsmanship, yet he is tortured by a deep melancholy. Athos had a wife earlier who turns out to be Milady. When he learnt of her past, he believes that he had killed her. Aramis is one of the Three Musketeers. Aramis is a handsome young man, quiet and very religious. He constantly protests that he is only temporarily in the Musketeers and that he will return to the church to pursue his true calling. Porthos is also another musketeer. He is loud, brash and self-important. He enjoys outfitting himself handsomely, but he is a valiant fighter and a courageous friend. Milady de Winter. She is a mysterious, beautiful, dangerous and evil spy. D'Artagnan becomes obsessed with her, but eventually she and the musketeers become fierce adversaries. Milady's left shoulder is branded with the fleur de lis, a mark put on the worst criminals. She kills anyone who finds it out. Late in the novel, her past is revealed. A teenager forced to enter the convent, she had fallen in love with a priest and had escaped with stolen church property to fund their new life, for which both of them were branded by a legal official. Hiding this past, she married Athos. Feeling dishonored, Athos had hanged her from a tree, but she survived. As Milady, she is unrepentant for her countless misdeeds. Now we will take up the character of Monsieur de Treville. He is the head of the King's Musketeers. Treville is an honorable and distinguished gentleman and a close friend of the king. He treats all his musketeers as his sons, and he is an important figure of support for the young D'Artagnan. He is a rival of Cardinal Richelieu for favor and influence with the king. Cardinal Richelieu, he is the king's most influential advisor. He is the most powerful man in France. He is furiously self-absorbed, but also an extremely effective leader of the state. Richelieu works hard to maintain the reputation and power of the king, since this is the stock on which his own status is based. So, here we conclude our discussion of the Three Musketeers. I hope you liked the story in translation, and I sincerely hope that this lesson will lead you into reading other translations of European literature in future. Thank you very much.